Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk only on Paranormal Experience Radio. Broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Noetics preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Good evening. Welcome to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. You are listening to Fate Mag Radio, and I am your host, Kat Hobson. Before we get into tonight's show, which is going to be absolutely kicking and fun, y'all are going to love these guys. I just wanted to say, first, happy birthday to Maisie. I love ya. Second, I had the best time with Night Stalker Paranormal with so many people I haven't seen in so long, and people that I just met. You know, Barry Gaunt, who is the director of the Octagon Hall Museum, thank you for your hospitality. I appreciate you so much. Everyone who is a member of Night Stalkers, y'all were fantastic. I learned so much about a place that I knew I loved. I just hadn't been able to get to yet. I'll be back soon. I want to thank Sherry Horsick for letting me be her +1. That was so much fun. And I just have to tell you that Greg Chili Childers, you're awesome. Your heart is good. You hosted a great event. I loved working through the building with y'all and learning. And TJ Justice, thank you. This was just a fantastic event. Doogie, it was great seeing you. And I mean, there's such a list that I can't possibly hit everybody, but that was one of the best events I've ever been to. And it was conducted professionally and respectful of the history of the structure. So many areas around the grounds even to experience. And we got wood knocks when we were outside. So that was new for me. I don't get to investigate outside a whole lot. So that was fantastic. Now, I have been really excited about tonight's show. This is the first time I have hosted a paranormal roundtable, or really an anomalous studies roundtable of this nature. And so I just talked to some of the smartest folks I know in their varying fields and decided that they were in, I was in, this was going to be a blast. And I'm thrilled. We have Butch Witkowski, who is the director and founder of UFO Research Center of Pennsylvania, editor of Journal of Abnormal Abduction Research. He is a member of Frontier Science. And you know I'm going to get this wrong, but he is a member of the Academy de Ufology. He is Paranexus consultant and advisor. He is the former MUFON chief investigator for his area. He was a STAR team investigator as well as state section director and former law enforcement. Then we also have Peter James Haviland, who is somebody I've enjoyed for years, just like Butch and just like our other guest. But Peter is an advanced certified clinical hypnotherapist. He started with Lloyd Auerbach as an investigator. Well, probably didn't start with Lloyd, has been doing this for some time. Investigator for the Office of Paranormal Investigations, co-founder of the Paranormal Research Organization, as well as a licensed private investigator, and Lone Star Spirits Paranormal is his. He's been on the Travel Channel. He's been in tons of books. The newspaper articles are fascinating. And he's worked as a consultant for other shows. We have Frank Lee, who is my partner in crime. And that's kind of fun. With the American Noetic Sciences Research Studies, we are co-founders of that group. Frank is also the founder and just brilliant researcher with CASPR, Central Alabama Society for Paranormal Investigation and Research, which basically is research, a paranormal research organization based out of Pell City, Alabama. We use logical methodologies to find out answers. He is a great one for dotting I's, crossing T's, making sure that things are so well documented, because, you know, if you don't have the information categorized, you just don't have the information. You have to have everything documented and in a way to logically review. And we base it on the tenets of psychology, biology, anthropology, and noetic sciences. It's just really, really fascinating, his approach to paranormal experiences, and I've enjoyed working with him for several years. And then I am also co-founder of this group. I've been a parapsychology research specialist and investigator, journalist, as well as a spiritual counselor with Central Alabama Society of Paranormal Investigations and Research. I have been a media person for over 5 years now, but mainly I love research and I love finding answers to things that, you know, questions that bother you so, as they say. So that's who you're listening to. That's who's going to be bringing their stuff. And I have to tell you, every single one of you are people I respect so much, and thank you for donating your time to be here. I haven't talked to you, Butch, for some time, and I have to tell you, I'm thrilled to be able to do that tonight. Thanks for, well, you gave us a scare. I'm so glad that you're well, or better. You sound great. I know you did. So, this is actually a great group of people, y'all. We all know each other and appreciate each other, respect each other's work. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. What topic do y'all want to address first? Frank? Right? People just said they can't hear y'all, so we're good now. Sorry about that.
Hey, thanks, Frank. I'll put that check in the mail tomorrow.
All right, I appreciate that.
For those of y'all that couldn't hear, we've got this fixed, but Frank was just saying that he's not sure what all we should talk about. He knows everything, and he doesn't know why I have everybody else here in this conversation. I kid. He was reading kudos. So, speaking
I'm a little
kudos.
concerned, actually, because I was told to prepay. So what? I you can send a check.
That was an early option. You waited too long, so.
Oh, is that what it was? Oh, okay.
That's Kat's rule. I mean, me personally, I'll take cash check, money order, out of town check, third party out of town check. I don't care.
How about somebody else's check? Will you do that?
Yeah. Hey, as long as the bank takes it, I will.
There you go.
Just for anyone wanting to send a donation, just use my initials to make it out to CASH.
I have missed this. I just really enjoy you guys. Well, we were talking about what topic to kick into, and I would be interested because I know all of y'all know a good bit about a lot of things, and I love research, so I read a lot about a lot of things. I don't get a chance to, as I said, I don't get to investigate outside much because usually I'm inside trying to figure out what on earth is happening in these people's home, or I'm trying to figure out what is happening above my hammock in the sky. But we have so many things. We've got ufology. I would be interested in talking about abduction experiences at some point in the evening, because when I got home this afternoon, I had a brand new book relevant to abductions and abduction theory. So, yay. But we also have noetics that Frank and I are involved in. And Peter, you cover everything.
Wow.
So
I'm sorry.
No, in a good way. In a good way. It's a positive.
I'm open to anything, honestly, and I know that doesn't help out much tonight. But if I don't know, as you know, I will tell you I don't know. So
true that. Good. I like and admire that. Just so you know.
Oh well, thank you.
So much better than somebody that's trying to, pull one over on you or get embarrassed when they don't know. Because these are weird things.
A little bit more about abductions. To be honest with you, I mean, I know a little bit about my little corner, but I don't strictly investigate those at all. I mean, I only come across them when I have clients in the chair. So I would be open to discussing that to start off with and see where that goes.
Okay. Everybody else good with that?
That sounds good to me, but the only thing is, this sounds like something that Butch is going to start off with, and everybody knows when Butch starts talking, some of that stuff he investigates is scary. I mean, I'm a pretty brave guy, but I had to sleep with like my blankie tonight after he starts talking about some of the stuff that he investigates, because it's you know, Butch, I admire and respect the hell out of you, but you know, some of that stuff is scary, and you're a little crazy for doing it. I'm just saying. You know, love you to death, but you know,
I wouldn't know how to take that, Butch. Honestly.
Well, Butch is just listening
because my little brain here.
Right.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there because he knows it's true.
you know, you're one of the best people I know. I admire the heck out of you, but you know, a little bit crazier than I am, you know. I'm just saying. So
I wouldn't go that far.
We can start off with abductions. Abductions last year were up about 10 to 12%, and that was nationwide. And this year we're down about 10%. Now, the stories, the sequences of the abductions has changed a great deal as far as I'm concerned with the cases I get, where a lot of cases in the past have been after the fact. You know, in other words, somebody wakes up and maybe 3 or 4 days later they think of something that happened, or they wake up, they're in a different part of the house or someplace where they weren't before. And missing time isn't really playing a big part anymore, as much as electrical disturbances, watches stopping work, cars shutting off, lights in the house going on and off, you know, a lot of electrical disturbances. And in the past, that wasn't really the bulk of the reports. The bulk of the reports always was lost time or waking up in a place where they weren't before they were taken. The scenarios are still the same as far as the type of individual that's seen either before the abduction takes place or during the abduction, but not very much after the abduction. You know, it's not like the entity picked you up at the house, took you to the craft, and the entity did whatever they were going to do, and then he's not seen anymore. The next thing you know, the person wakes up. There have been in the past year some pretty serious injuries with abductees.
That's new, isn't
it? Normally it was like, you know, scoop mark or black and blue mark or a pinhole or something like that. People are, you know, now it's like fractured bone in the arm, vaginal tearing, and this is stuff that was never reported before.
That's crazy.
Holes, almost like a scope job done at the hospital, you know, below the navel. They don't know what's missing. Spots on lungs during an X-ray that are there when the X-ray is taken, and a week later the spots are gone. Well, that don't happen. You know, if it'd be cancer or something like that, or COPD. So there are a lot of strange things have been happening with the abduction scenarios. They are more prevalent right now in the East Coast than they have been in a long time. For years, it was always spread out across the country. I mean, it didn't matter where. There was always a story. But now it just seems like in the past year, a lot of the scenarios are happening on the East Coast. Not too much in the South. I'm going to say mostly from the Southern Virginia on up into, you know, up into Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, that area. And another thing that a fellow researcher is working on, I haven't gotten his final paper yet, but he's trying to correlate witchery, black arts, with abduction scenarios. Now, I'm not that bright to put those two together, but he's got some interesting theories. And I believe what it boils down to, I guess, is spell casting. Now, what I know about spell casting, you couldn't put in a thimble. I mean, I have no idea what that's about, and demonology and all that other stuff. But there's interesting theories popping up all the time with abductions. And another thing, which might interest Pete, a lot of times people that are reporting an abduction, the very first thing they want to do is get to a hypnotist. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as a researcher on my end, you know, I just give them the information. I don't make the contact. I don't want to be involved in that. And another thing we're finding is a lot of elderly. I'm going to say elderly. I got to watch that. I just remembered how old I am.
Yes, be careful here too.
Yeah, I got to be careful about that. They're buying books on abduction.
Yes.
And they're basically reporting to you, you know, paragraph after paragraph verbatim of these books. Now, I just tend to blow that off as just, and we see that in ufology and cryptozoology and everything else, just lonely people, you know, who want to be recognized or talk to somebody about something different than their everyday thing. And it's, I don't know, it's this connection that's trying to be made, and it's not just this one guy, the one researcher I know. There's a couple researchers doing it. There's one in Puerto Rico also that they're trying to put together witchcraft and abductions, certain types of sightings of certain types of creatures, like harbingers of death or bad news or whatever. And I find that interesting, although there's not really a whole lot you can do with that. I mean, you're going to get a story, but, you know, where do you go to get the research? You know, you can buy the Malleus Maleficarum.
Yes.
And read that, but that's not going to tell you anything.
Well, not about a particular case, certainly.
No. I mean, you know, and there's really, the books that are written on black arts and witchcraft are dedicated to the black arts and witchcraft. There's not really any stories in there that you can, you know, back up research with or find anything about. So I tend to stay away from that, but it's just a thing to throw out there that this stuff is becoming more prominent. And it's just over the last year and a half, maybe year and 8 months. And I think as researchers, we're all going to hear more of it.
Do you think that's because people are being more open about their practicing of witchcraft?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've gone to conferences already where, I mean, they walk right up to me. And,
I've had that happen.
Want to discuss UFOs and witchcraft. Now, I can't even put those two together. But I've had that happened on a couple of occasions, and it's kind of strange. But I would really like the ones that try to hide it. You know, like we were doing a thing up in northern Pennsylvania, a conference for a charity, and there were a whole bunch of vendors there, all kinds, paranormal, UFOs, all kind of guys. And this lady came up, and just the minute she walked into the under the canopy and started looking at stuff, and you know, I noticed her neckwear. I thought, stay away from this one. So after I passed her off, I got out of there.
Well, you know,
that stuff is,
go ahead.
You know, that stuff's spooky. I'll walk through a graveyard. I'll go into any house. I'll do anything paranormal wise. Just something about that black art stuff that just shies me away. Maybe it's my background as a Roman Catholic. I have no idea, but they were no angels either. But, you know, you find witchcraft in cryptozoology. I have yet to find it in ufology, but in cryptozoology you see it quite a bit.
Could see that.
Well, okay, I'm gonna go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, to Butch, as you were talking about the cases of seeing people making that connection of witchcraft and things like that with the abductions. I couldn't help but hear that old expression echoing in my mind, that correlation does not equal causation. And
right.
But, a lot of people, never grasp that concept.
Well, that and you have all these shows on TV. I mean, they throw everything up against the wall, whatever sticks. But I found that there are some people that take the stuff off of television verbatim. I mean, that's
yes.
the law. That's the Bible. That's the way it works. That's the way it is. And if you're not conducting yourself in that manner, you're not a good researcher.
I have a question relevant to this.
Yeah, that's one thing that does bother me too. Is that a lot of times folks don't look into the history of what they're trying to study versus the stuff that's on TV. And you got to study where you've been so you can move forward to the future and understand what's going on in the present. And that's always gotten to me too. So I agree with that.
Well, my question is that a lot of times people who practice the dark side of magic, and I do believe that there are people who try to present as witches versus magical people. I do believe there's a difference. So a lot of times I have found that people who practice both sides try to instill, especially if they're trying to make someone believe that they're being attacked, then there's a lot of showmanship that goes into this, and there's a lot of discussion about their abilities that seems to be built up. I have also found that people who do not do that are generally much more serious about their abilities. It's kind of like you don't have to talk about it if you can do it, kind of a thing.
Right.
So,
but the spirit world to me has always been weird.
It is,
because there's just so many different types and practices in that realm that it just, after a while you get a headache. Trying to figure out, what are they working on? Some ancient mysteries, or are they just working on the occult, or are they truly working on spirituality, or anything like? I mean, there's just so many things they delve in. But when you go back and you start to research witches back in the witches days, just like cryptids. I mean, when you get back into those times, it's totally different. I mean,
yes, it's more holistic.
And they didn't have crock pots either.
And it wasn't negative. It was helping.
Right. And when it turns, it took a very sharp, deep turn. It wasn't like something that just slowly rolled around and went in another direction. There was like a breaking point in the 13th, 14th century, where no, this is what we were doing. This is where we stopped. Now we're going to go this way, and then progressively got worse as time went on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was when people just started letting their anger, negativity, things that had built up within them become an excuse for bad behavior. And I think as a society, we have been watching that evolve. I do need to let people know that you are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is Fate Mag Radio, and you are listening to our very first Anomalous Research Roundtable. So thank you for being here. I'm sorry, Butch, I interrupted you.
No. The only thing I was going to say was I agree with you wholeheartedly on what you just said, that, and you can see it progress if you're doing any background research going back into those years where if a crop failed, they quickly strung a couple up or burned a couple at a stake.
Well, before that period, though, they were actually people who would take credit for that in order to instill fear or trepidation to make themselves seem powerful. And Tina in chat says a true practitioner will not brag, prance around, or be a showman or woman. And I agree with that. That's what I was saying, where if you can do it, you don't talk about it.
Right.
So,
right.
But
well,
it's a quiet confidence is what you're saying, right?
Yes, you don't have a need to seek attention for it.
Well, looking at that time period, you had, you also have to consider the way that things were in history. You had the church was the government, and you had, you would have one ruler come into power who would say, okay, this is going to be the official religion. And the next ruler may say, no, we don't like that one, so we're going to believe it this way. And then, just because one person converts or, one person says you should convert and change your beliefs doesn't mean that everybody that lives there is going to.
Exactly.
So, that led to a lot of the conflicts that we saw throughout history over religion and different things. And, in a lot of ways, we saw through history where religion was used as a control device for populations. And
still is.
And
in different cultures.
You see those clashes, you see those changes in society. You see, it's just like if you look at literary works throughout history. One of the best ways of actually seeing the mood and everything isn't from looking at an encyclopedia. It's looking at what the works of fiction are. What were people dreaming of and imagining? Mm-hmm. And you see those shifts through, all the way back to, like with Aristotle and Socrates to, on into, my mind's going blank. Like throughout the Renaissance and, on up to even Shakespeare. It's such a dramatic change, but yet it flows with the religious period, the political shifts, it's all reflected in those.
Yeah, and when you go back about the churches, like you said, they were ruling. Well, the churches back then, especially the Church of England and the Catholic Church, they had their own armies.
Mm-hmm.
So when it came to the English Church of England was pretty slick, because England at that time, in that time period back in that 13th, 14th, 15th century, a lot of England was nothing but countryside hamlets. Mm-hmm. And not everybody lived downtown from the local church. So what they did was, which all of us really helped the werewolf scenario, was they would hire, the church would actually hire a murderer and say, you need to go to this hamlet and this hamlet, and we want you to kill somebody. We don't care, young, old, blind, crippled, doesn't matter, just kill somebody, but rip them up really bad, make it look like an animal did it. And they would pay that person or persons, and they would go do that. And of course, these people freaked out and, went to the church, and then the church said, well, we'll send the army in. So they would send in the army. And of course, they would catch the guy and kill him and bury him. Nobody ever knew he existed. And then they would claim credit for taking care of the werewolf, with the caveat that now that we took care of that, you join our church and we'll protect you from here on in. And that's
I was not familiar with that.
Oh, yeah.
I was not aware of that.
Then it's the Catholic Church picked up in Spain, did the same thing, because, again, rural areas, no churches, not that many priests to go around, so they would just hire somebody, go do something like that, and then go into the people in those hamlets and say, look, we'll send protection, we'll send in our troops, and we'll take care of it for you. And of course, after the troops killed the guy, nothing ever happened again. But that's how they became members. And Church of England and the Catholic Church were two of the biggest professors of that. But I found stories of that back in Roman times, where especially along the outer regions of Rome at that time, which could have been half the world, where these, you had small tribes, and they did the same thing. They would, just rip them up and then come in and say, look, you pay us so much in taxes or so much whatever a year, and we'll station guards here. And they would station, 6 or 10 legionnaires to watch over the hamlet. So the church has played a big part in a lot of these stories that go over time. But again, then there's stories that make no sense whatsoever.
Crazy. I mean, seriously. No wonder people have a hard time trusting the church. That did not set a good precedent.
Well, and then when you... True. Well, and especially when you consider, kind of like we were just talking about, how the church and the government originally were the same body for, a lot of countries for years and years. I mean, that definitely would make it hard to trust either one.
Right.
But between things like that and, if you consider, I mean, the Renaissance period, that this whole period where you had, Isaac Newton and Francis Bacon, and you had, all these scientists just coming forward out of the woodwork, Voltaire and all of these, making all these discoveries and finally able to publish them. The Renaissance was a direct result of society basically getting tired of religious oppression, because it wasn't long before the Renaissance period that you had to remember you had Galileo getting faced with the Inquisition for saying, hey, I don't believe that, what you're saying is right. You had, Copernicus facing the Inquisition for saying we're not the center of the universe. And,
right.
You had people that, got convicted by the Inquisition for saying, hey, Earth isn't flat. I mean, well, you still have people that have some groups that want to put them to the Inquisition for that, but
and those groups have chapters all around the world.
Absolutely, ironically.
Right. I had to put that in there.
But not only did you have the oppressiveness and the control factor, but you had them pushing, no, you don't challenge what we say. You don't let anyone know that, there's more to it. You don't question it. And for me personally, that's what got me into research. That's what always drove me to science, and what eventually would lead me into getting into paranormal and anomalous research is, okay, science can explain this. There's a formula for this and this and this and this, but science has no clue about this, and I want to know what that is. How does that work? And, people like me, I would have been one of the first ones at the Inquisition. I wouldn't be here to be on a radio show. I would have already been dunked in the river for witchcraft or something by now.
Yes, you would. Well, one of the things that surprises me is the gullibility that would, I feel, have to support something like that occurring. And, I'm old. It takes a good bit to set me back on my heels, and that just kind of did. I think that the things that are going through my head are, how did people not question anything? And we actually have a different question in chat, but it's, have churches way back ever reported or talked about aliens? She's sure they've talked about demons, angels, and probably witchcraft and voodoo too, but she just isn't aware of any time that it might have been a discussion of things that came from outer space.
Well, yeah, especially in the Indian religion where
yes.
Krishna fought great air battles, from things from another planet. You had a lot of the cave drawings that were way before the pen and pencil were invented. Matter of fact, they just found one, I think, in Peru that's been dated back, a couple thousand years.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some of the famous artworks where you have like the Madonna and Child, where you have a saucer in the air. So there's I don't know how they were talked about, but I think one of the things that kind of explains a lot when you go back over that old research, like Frank was talking about, is fear. I mean, most people, like 99% of the people, they didn't have anything. They didn't own their land. They didn't own their home. Everything was put forth by landowners and land barons. And, they just worked till they dropped. And all the churches, all the kingdoms, fiefdoms, they were all connected. Intermarriage, and look at all the land that the Knights Templar owned. I mean, they owned half of Europe. So you have, there was that fear, and they were the authorities were never questioned. They were never questioned about anything because everybody figured, they got rich by knowing everything, so we'll just listen to them and that's it. And if you wanted to go against them, well, you wound up hanging off a cross and a crucifixion, or just hanging or mutilated or whatever.
Well, also don't forget too, in the Bibles, Ezekiel saw the wheel. So was that an alien thing? Was that a manifestation of God? I mean, what was it?
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff. My problem was most people that are doing research don't read. They do all the research on the computer, and we all know that the internet doesn't lie.
Right.
But
it doesn't. It doesn't.
No,
of course not.
Absolutely not.
If it's on there, it's true.
I know it doesn't lie because I put that on Facebook.
I started using it in about 2000, and I was done in 2001. I read the whole thing. So we have an issue with, people not realizing that what's going on today is not something that's new. I mean, this just didn't all start with Roswell. I mean, there's pictures that were taken. There were glass types taken of spacecraft in 1860, 1898, and there were there was no Polaroids back then.
Well, you had and you had Aurora happen before 47. And that was it. Wasn't that followed through for a little while before it even got to Aurora? The ship was anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now the two researchers, the husband-wife team, have been working on the Aurora case for many, many years. The stuff is amazing, and
yes, it is.
And then there's cases out there that like Stevensville, Texas, that deal out there. There was a lot of good information on that case, a lot. And,
there was. There was.
I believe it was Ken Sherry was a MUFON then. I think he was the one heading that up, him and Steve Huggins, I think. But, it is what it is. I mean...
And we lost a lot when Jim Mars passed, too.
Yeah, and you have, a lot of researchers and a lot of cases that come up. The idea to take the information and just put it in a file, well... I'm not a great fan of that. I mean, follow it till you can't follow it anymore is the way you should be doing it. But,
well, that's all you can do, really.
That is.
That's all you can do.
And all the disciplines are different. I mean, paranormal investigations are done differently than UFO investigations. UFO investigations are done differently than cryptid investigations. And then you can go into a whole other realm of stuff that's, out there. But it's at the point now in this time, in this age, where electronically is the only way we're going to get stuff. I mean, the days of just writing something down and professing it to be a fact, it doesn't cut it anymore.
No.
So, it's either thermal imaging.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
Because I like having more than just somebody's statement.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and something that I just want to throw out there, and this relates to what you were saying earlier, when you were talking about how what's going on today is not new. And I absolutely believe that as well. But something that we have to remember, too, is like mentioning how everything is done differently, even though it's all some form of anomalous research. Our reality is shaped by our perception, our understanding, and our perspective. That is, and that's nothing, paranormal related. I can point that out to you in any psychology textbook, and that's just basic.
Yes,
and it is all relatable to it. If I'm someone who has no clue about the paranormal, ufology, or any of that, say I'm very devoutly religious, haven't been exposed to anything like that, and I see an anomalous event occur, then I'm automatically going to interpret it as something spiritual. Whereas if I'm somebody that is from a ufology background with, maybe I haven't been around paranormal much, or maybe I haven't been around religion much, or whatever, then I'm probably going to look for a ufology explanation. And we have to consider that even in looking at ancient text. They might have visioned something 2,000 years into the future. They might have seen helicopters and jets that we see every day, but they would have to rely on their own understanding.
Right.
Well, ancient alien theorists say that there are depictions of helicopters and iPads, and there's so much stuff, and it's really funny because a lot of the Star Trek devices were made to look like some of the things based on ancient alien theory back in the day. And I find it interesting that our flip phones, our iPads, our, laptop bags all look like things taken from Star Trek. And it's like a round robin of ideas that keep getting mixed. We have another question in chat, which is, do any of you think that the paranormal and alien worlds intertwine in any way? And we've got about 12 minutes before we take our news break, and we are streamlining this because this is interesting stuff. So what do y'all think about just general paranormal and alien worlds?
My conclusion after 30 years of doing this is that it's all intertwined. Paranormal, cryptozoology, ufology, there's a link somewhere. But I truly believe it's all intertwined.
Do you think it's interdimensional?
Well, it could be if we could prove interdimension. But
that I agree with.
Say that again?
Nobody's ever proven.
Nobody's ever proven any of this exists in the first place.
Right.
So interdimensionality would not be that far of a jump, really.
Well, first off, I'm going to say that I agree with Butch and Peter on that. I do believe it's intertwined. And it's funny that after 20 years in research, it's not a matter of learning how much I know. What I'm really learning is, I kind of grasp a little bit more how much I don't know
every day.
If that makes any sense.
Agree with that too. as far and reaching back as far as some of y'all have done research on, I could see how that would make anybody feel like, well, it's more of a what I don't know than what I know. I totally believe that. I really do.
Yeah. Well, it's like I say often, we can't focus on a certain planet or solar system we're looking at. So what do? We build a better telescope to focus in on it. And every time we build a bigger, better telescope, we point it at the sky, and guess what happens? The sky gets a little bit bigger, and our minds are blown all over again.
And more clear.
It's kind of the same.
Yes.
Right. We figure out, hey, whoa, it's even bigger out there than we realize, and we become a little bit smaller on the grand scale of things. And the same thing happens in the paranormal and anomalous research, that every time we look a little closer, it gets a little bigger. And we realize, wow, this is more interconnected than we ever could have imagined. And wow, we've just got that much more to learn. But as far as the interdimensionality, I will put this out there. They did do, this is how close we are, honestly, which we still have quite a ways to go. But so far they've been able to show what seems to be an apparent jump in a single photon. So so we're probably still a good 50 years away from anything substantial. So
okay, I'm going to interrupt you here because you have 8.5 minutes to explain to our listeners what that means. Because that's only fair to them.
Mm-hmm. That basically the way that we test a lot of theories. How does light bend? How does how does time affect? How's time affected under different circumstances? All that. Well, we can't just sit somebody in a chair, strap them into a nuclear reactor, and hope for the best. Say, good luck, Jim. Here's your lunch, and hope to see you.
That's kind of frowned on here and there.
Right. That OSHA frowns on it. I'm all up for it, as long as I'm not sitting in a chair, but, wouldn't be the first time that I was the topic of a safety meeting.
True that.
But, I can tell you some stories from that, but basically, so we have to go with what we can and kind of build up from there, which often entails, watching a single particle, how it behaves under a given situation in a controlled environment, and just literally starting from the ground up. And, okay, well, we did this with one particle, we did this with one photon, or we fired this one electron and it behaved this way. How does it work when we alter it and shoot multiples, and, just kind of build from there. And that's kind of the stage we're at. Is we've just done it with a single photon. So that has literally been this year. So there's still quite a ways to go.
But it's pretty cool that this is developing along this path. And Butch, I'm going to tell you that when I said that these other fields aren't proven either, I didn't mean to be rude. I feel like I was rude. So.
No.
I just felt like that. Just saying.
Rude.
Well, too quick with my statement, maybe. But none of it really is. That's why it's anomalous research, right? Because none of it really is proven. So right. Open-ended things are what we do.
Well, when you read some of the reports or you read some of the stories, they're just, some of them are so outrageous, it's unbelievable. But then when you either meet that person or talk to that person and just say that, how can you prove what you're saying? What's your proof? What evidence do you have? And they go blank on you. And that's yes. Like, okay.
Conversation is really not moving on from here. I understand it. But, it's almost like they're trying, in some cases. I have only recently been in a position to speak with experiencers. it's fascinating to me. And Peter, I would like your input on this too here, please. With the abductions, you had mentioned that until they come to you, you really don't get a chance to study them, or they don't come into your sphere, as it were. When people come to you with this, and you are doing, I'm assuming regressive therapy. That's a big leap, but
yes.
Okay. So,
well, basically,
would you agree?
Witness recall. Yeah.
Okay. Would you agree with the theory that these people have had a hex or something of that nature, or are they recalling what appears to be a very true experience?
Well, there's been a couple of things that I've found. One of them is that you have people that want to experience something, especially have studied a lot about it. And what I've noticed is that sometimes people take traumatic events and mold them into experiences. I've seen that. I've seen people wanting to be part of a group and try to create experiences, and which is basically false memory syndrome. And then I've come across those that have had possible experience as far as abduction or communication in some way. And it's real hard sometimes to pick up that information because you're dealing with a lot of trauma on the end, if it is a serious thing, or if it's a legitimate experience, and and trying to break through that wall of protection, or screen memory from I have a friend of mine that does a lot of abductee hypnosis, and Daryl Sims, and he told me about screen memories of what is placed there, so you think what you've seen is what you've seen, but it's actually not. And those are hard to get around sometimes as well. I usually, whenever I come up against something like that, I usually refer to him, only because I just don't deal with it that often. But yeah, you just kind of have to look at the experience to find out what exactly you're dealing with before you can even say that it is an abduction or a communication syndrome. I don't know if that explains the question, but that's what I've seen so far.
That reminds me of something I was so curious about with you, Peter. Is when Butch first started talking about abductions, I was kind of curious if you had ever talked with someone that had no idea they'd ever had an experience like that, and maybe uncovered it, or a similar type of experience.
Well, what I normally do is that I never talk to or try to dig it out, only because you don't want to create the memory, right. So I always approach it as, what have you experienced, what have you seen, can you describe, open-ended questions, so the information is coming from them. From what I've experienced, and it's just it's more legitimate to me that way, instead of instead of digging into, if they say, well, I've seen a gray being, was it alien? Well, now you've placed into their mind that it was an alien. A gray being can be anything. It could be what you think is a gray being. But once I place, was it an alien? Now your mind is taking, alien is trying to sculpt something to say, yes, it had big eyes. Well, that's what we are taught by TV research and all that other of what an alien, or what people experience aliens to be. But if you try to pull it out,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We are right at the top of the hour, and we're going to have to revisit this because this part is fascinating to me. I just love this. So, and we have questions relevant to this too in chat that we'll pick up as we come back. But for now, we will be back. This is our news break, and this is a great time to fill up your coffee mug or stein or tea glass. Thank you for being here, and we will be back.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. After announcing a Phase 1 trade agreement with the U.S., China has now delayed tariffs on American imports that previously had been set to go into effect today. NPR's Amy Chang reports on the latest reprieve in the U.S.-China trade dispute.
In response to the U.S. postponing a planned tariff increase and cutting some existing tariffs in half, the State Council in Beijing suspended its own retaliatory penalties on U.S. goods, such as farm products and automobile parts. This decision came after top officials in both countries reached consensus on an interim trade deal. According to U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, Chinese negotiators committed to purchasing $40 billion of U.S. agricultural products over the next 2 years, in addition to promising reforms on issues like technology transfer. Details about when and where the Phase 1 trade deal will be formalized are unclear. Officials in Beijing left these questions unanswered during Friday's press conference, but Washington says it is aiming to sign early next month. Amy Chang, NPR News, Beijing.
A historic vote on Capitol Hill this week as the Democratic-led House is expected to vote to impeach President Trump. A trial will then be held in the Republican-led Senate, which is expected to acquit him. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy spent today encouraging his state to embrace its diversity in the wake of an attack on a kosher market in Jersey City last Tuesday. NPR's Jeff Brady reports authorities labeled the attack domestic terrorism and said it was motivated by hatred for Jews and police.
Jersey City is the most diverse city and the most diverse state, according to Governor Phil Murphy. And while that has sometimes led to conflict, Murphy said it's also a point of pride. He took that message to Mount Pisgah African Methodist Episcopal Church Sunday morning.
We are all the sons and daughters of God. When one of us comes under attack, we all come under attack.
The church is less than a mile from the market, where 2 shooters killed 3 people and then died after a gun battle with police. Authorities say they also killed a police detective in a nearby cemetery and are suspects in the death of another man a few days before. Jeff Brady, NPR News, Jersey City.
In Hong Kong, more clashes between protesters and police. It took place in a shopping mall as holiday shoppers watched from the floors above. Police arrested several protesters, reportedly spraying liquid into their faces. This latest pro-democracy protest comes as leader Carrie Lam continues her visit to Beijing, her first since last month's district council elections. Twitter says it will bring back special labels to help users identify tweets from political candidates. The company first used those labels for midterm elections last year and says it's trying to prevent spoofed and faked accounts from fooling voters. Many political candidates already have blue check marks to indicate Twitter has checked that they are who they say they are, but these labels will go further, providing details on where the person is and what office they're running for. This is NPR. The leader of Britain's opposition Labour Party has apologized for his party's crushing defeat in Thursday's elections. Vicky Barker has more from London.
When Jeremy Corbyn's predecessor, Ed Miliband, suffered an election defeat in 2015, he took full responsibility for the loss and immediately stepped down as party leader. Jeremy Corbyn has so far failed to do either. But writing in the left-leaning Daily Mirror and the Observer newspaper today, the Labour leader says, in his words, "I'm sorry that we came up short and I take my responsibility for it." Millions of longtime Labour supporters in central and northern England defected to Boris Johnson's Conservative Party in Thursday's vote based on Johnson's slogan to get Brexit done. It is a promise Johnson now says he intends to keep by the January 31st deadline. For NPR News, I'm Vicky Barker in London.
In Italy, more than 50,000 people were evacuated from the southern port city of Brindisi as experts work to defuse a World War II bomb. Officials say the operation is the biggest peacetime evacuation in Italy. The British bomb, believed to have been dropped on the city in 1941, was found by chance last month during renovations at a movie theater. The device will be taken to a quarry where the TNT inside will be destroyed in a controlled explosion. Crude oil prices are trading lower in overnight Asian trading, down about 0.5% at $59.77 a barrel, and electronic trading on the New York Mercantile Exchange. I'm Janine Herbst, NPR News in Washington.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I have to tell y'all that I am having a fantastic time with this show. I had no idea that we were going to be getting into such depth, and I love that we are experiencing some conversation. Basically, we're going into some quantum here, but mainly just interesting stuff. And I wanted to say, an addendum to my previous opening, Leanne and Todd Askew and Billy and Tanya Sims, I had so much fun with y'all too. The list just keeps growing. So, I am ready. I am ready to get back to Pete's statements, and we have some questions also in chat. And Peter, I did not mean to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You know me. You're gonna have to slap me quiet, so so you can move on to something else.
Well, I'm not known for being quiet and shy, so it's all good. So, but
well,
y'all didn't really have to laugh that hard.
The answer to that question has got to be interesting, since we have two parapsychology researchers, an alien, an alien UFO researcher, and a clinical hypnotherapist all on the line at the same time. It's got to be good.
Absolutely, because you know what? Be careful what you ask for.
Right. Yeah, right. And right now, all of the voices in my head are arguing at the same time, so I don't know how to answer that.
Oh, well.
Right.
Just let the loudest one win.
Hey, it's better than what happens to me, because all the voices in my head have been singing Christmas carols for like 3 days straight, and it's like driving me crazy. I miss when they were just arguing with each other.
That's the result of finals week, Frank.
Oh, that reminds me. I forgot to pick up my medication today.
Hey, at least it's better than hearing Grandma got run over by a reindeer just constantly.
Oh, thanks.
Hey, don't give them ideas.
Oh, my goodness.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the suggestion. I promise it wasn't professional.
Well, you are a professional. You should be aware. We're going to talk after the show. Well, this has been so fascinating, and I'm going to give credit and a shout out, because you know what? I'm really proud of my friend who is stepping into a whole different realm of lifestyle right now and has come through it, the first part of it, like a champ. And Frank, congratulations on getting through your first semester back in college full-time, as you're working full-time and living full-time. And congratulations on that 4.0.
Well,
kudos, my friend.
That was a heck of a accomplishment there, man. Congratulations to you.
Well, I appreciate that. College is expensive, mainly because I had to bribe all my professors to have a 4.0 average across all my classes. But
whatevs.
Whatever it takes to get through it,
It's all about dedication. That's why I've been working so many hours.
But you have done a really amazing and good thing. So, good job.
Well, I appreciate it.
Now, Sherry said maybe we'd prefer Grandma got abducted by an alien.
But okay, with the four of us on this call right now, I'm pretty sure that we can come up with we can write that. We can make that happen.
We would not even have to blink. But when we were coming through here before we went to the break, and guys, I'm sorry, I have streamlined this. We're doing just station announcements at the bottom of the hour and then that break. But I am so fascinated. I did not know where this conversation was going to go when we started. I just knew who I had in this panel, and I knew it would be fun and interesting. You were talking about the different experiences that you had dealing with people who believe they have had an alien experience. And I do want to say something. When you were talking about, and Butch, I believe it was you that was talking about watches and electronics dying.
Right.
Does that go on for the length from the people that you have interviewed and had discussions with relevant to this professionally and everything else? And Peter, you will know this too. Is that something that is a lifetime experience, or does it fade the farther they get away from their experience as maybe their electrical, the body's electrical system gets back in sync somewhat?
Well, some cases, when they're relating a case, it may have happened when they were a child, and now they're in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they just remember it. And that's usually when you have more than one in the same residence, like a brother and sister may have had the same incident happen to them when they were children. But then, later on in life is when they remember it. And up until that point, they don't remember anything. But when you interview those, a couple or, people like that, you interview them separately, and the stories are just right on, dead on. I mean, they're exactly the same. So something did happen. Now, what happened, and, and they didn't think about it, or it never came to their mind within, that 30, 40, 50 year span of when it happened to when they remembered it. And,
but did they have the experience of the damaging electronics around them through that whole period, or does it abate?
No, the one that came to mind when you said that was the brother and sister were sitting there watching TV on a Saturday night back when they used to have all this, the movie shows on, like you'd watch Werewolves or whatever, and horror shows. Right. And they had an experience where they saw something walk through the wall. And the TV shut off, and that's what made them, get up to fix the TV. And that's when they seen this individual walk through the wall. And then there was this blank time span. And, when they came up, that show was over and another show was halfway through. And that they didn't recall that. I believe it was 37 or 38 years till they recalled that incident. And the incident was identical from both people, and they don't even live in the same state anymore. So it was pretty cool for us because we could interview the one, and then I had one of my guys go over and interview the other one, and the written statements were identical. And
that's interesting. Did they have the recall at the same time?
Yeah. Yep. Matter of fact.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, the traumatic event happened at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I could see.
No, I mean
that.
when they recall, like
they were at a family dinner, and not dinner, a picnic, and they were outside talking, and somebody there must have been something on TV, like Third Kind or something like that, was brought up, And the brother leaned over to the sister and he said, I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a long time. And as he's putting this out to his sister, she remembers it dead on.
Oh, yeah.
So, a lot of strange stuff
items like that trigger a lot.
Yeah,
items like that trigger a lot.
Not unusual at all.
I just find that fascinating.
Then you'll have
multiple.
And
on my end of it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you have multiple family things like that where one family will have something happen that, they kind of keep a deep, dark secret. And then they find out that their other relatives on the other side of town or another state or, further away had the same thing. So there was a research paper done on that where why are abductees related?
Or generational experiencers.
For many generations, not just for a generation or two, for many. And whether it was something to do with what they were looking for or trying to grasp or trying to cultivate with that experiencer, it could be anything. But, it's some of the stuff is really weird. I mean, and these kids, I believe, if I remember right, they were like 8 years old, 7 years old, something like that, 7 or 8. Wow. That's a long time. And then to just bring it up casually, at a picnic, and then, and then they relate the story. And then, when they were interviewed, the story was identical. They remembered the TV shutting off, getting up to fix the TV. And that was when they saw this entity go through the wall. They described the entity as it wasn't described as a gray. It was described as a maybe 5 foot tall, bluish colored, emaciated looking individual. And
wow, I haven't heard anything like that.
I've heard of blues, but that's
okay.
That's interesting.
Well, from a psychological perspective, I mean, as strange as it may be for them to both have that simultaneous recall of it. I mean, if you consider what happens when, especially them being children at the time, and as a as a defensive mechanism, sometimes we repress memories. And
it's a PTSD moment.
Obviously something experienced or said at that picnic triggered that recall that, just some, and it might have been something off the wall, not even related to it. Just even as subtle as a smell or a scent can trigger that spontaneous recall. And then suddenly you have it. And, it is so odd, but it does happen.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it does.
Peter,
it happens.
Yes.
More. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you if you would come forward. We've got 2 minutes right now, but we can always come back. I wanted you to share your side of that.
Well, having dealt with a lot of folks with PTSD, it does happen more often than you might think, and it is. You are correct about something even as small as a smell can bring back your subconscious to that time, whatever that time is, and usually from what I've seen is it comes back in smaller amounts, but it comes back fully either over a short period of time or a long period of time, depending on how strong the memory was. Now, I have heard of total recall before, so that's what fascinates me when I was hearing about the total recall from the both of them. It doesn't surprise me that they both recalled the same thing at the same time, because the event was they both experienced it at the same time. Now, looking at the emaciated blue person you're talking about, what I would probably do is I would probably take them back to that time, and I would see what actually happened during the event. Now, I know that they said that they were watching TV, but there was also a place in there that they blacked out time. So I would try to try to drop the wall to see what the actual issue was and what their mind was covering, because of the traumatic event. So it could have been an event. It could have been, and I hate to say it, it could have been a molesting event. I mean, you really don't know the family. I mean, that's something you have to look at as well, because right. We tend to make up the weirdest stuff to control the weird stuff that happens to us.
Yes, you can cope with different kinds of weird.
Exactly. If if it's about a monster movie, could you be covering up the monster that lives in your house? And yes. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying that that's what I've experienced.
Well, it's a possibility.
Yes.
Because
all possibilities.
Yes. And I was mistaken when I said that we were going to be cutting for a break. We're free flowing here, so.
Okay.
When you deal with people who are repressing and you find the screen memories, that is a whole different thing to deal with. How do you ascertain that it truly is a screen memory that's separating something? And if those are screen memories, have they been put in place by another event or something of that nature to protect? And do you, like with the quantum hypnotherapy?
Well, it's not so much of placing it there to block the event that happened. It's more sometimes when you're dealing with an abductee, and this is coming from having learned from Daryl, and I'm not trying to drop names. It's just that's how I know. But it's when it's the alien or alien being placing something to cover up what they're doing, not so much of what has happened to you. It's what they're doing to you. And now trying to get around that, it's a very, very tricky thing, because then again you're dealing with false memory syndrome, so you got to kind of poke around it to get at what they can remember, and drill more into what they remember to have them expand more of what their memories are to try to see if they could get through it. It's hard. From even what Daryl's told me, it's a real hard process that he does too. So
well, is that
does that answer your question?
Well, is it something that is placed there? Is it something that's placed there to be a protection for the person having the experience, or is it something placed there to prevent them being afraid beyond capability of coping if a entity shows back up?
I think it might be I think it might be a little bit of both, of us placing something there, and maybe something being placed into us to either stop them from remembering what happened, or maybe even covering what is happening. Yes. Because it has been brought up that I can't remember which one of you gentlemen brought it up about or lady about generational abductions, and
I did, because in the Betty and Barney Hill case, that family had generational experiences as well as others.
Right. So could there be one specific memory because of what they're doing and what the process is? Could it be the same? The reason why that we can recall a lot of the same thing is because it's the same process, and through generation of abductions. That would be my question. And I haven't really had the opportunity to work a generational case yet. I have heard about them. And I've discussed it with other folks, but on a generational case, no, I've never dealt with it.
The concept is fascinating to me because that would lend credence toward the theory of medical or genetic study as opposed to just for giggles, right?
No, right. And one of the things I've noticed too, as far as PTSD, whether it's recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis we're talking about the electromagnetic pulses of either abductees or even poltergeist activity. It's still something that there is a correlation between poltergeist activity there and alien abduction. Right there is PTSD and the electronic pulses, because we can create it as well through our body.
And I'll just throw this out there too, that from from my research and several other, from a parapsychology perspective, those natural abilities of having the ability to create the spontaneous psychokinesis and different ESP abilities seem to have some sort of genetic tie as well. So
yes, it does.
That could, that also plays in a whole different factor as well.
Yes, it does, and even the tie into preternatural activity. Possession. Possession looks a whole lot like RSPK. Now that could be just a learning thing because we really didn't know what possession was versus poltergeist activity, and we're just now learning about all of the correlations between the two within the last 50, 100 years. But that could be a correlation too between aliens and all of that, and then again, it all stems within ourselves too. So that's that circle, that triangle right there. We're in the middle of that one too.
And I have to be the bad guy who throws this out there too.
Sure, go ahead.
But you also have to consider anytime you have someone having a sensational experience or something that's unbelievable, there's always the question: is this a legitimate experience, or is this a hallucination? Exactly. Is this is it drugs? Is it mental illness? And
of course.
Also with genetics, you have to look at certain conditions like schizophrenia and certain things like that are also very hereditary as well. So if someone in one generation has a diagnosis of schizophrenia or certain conditions, then it is very likely to continue as well. So I just had to be the devil's advocate who threw that out there.
He does that to my theories all the time.
Yeah, and I think the same way as you do. You have to look at all your natural, the natural ways before you look at anything paranormal. In any way, shape, or form. Because if you don't, then you're not really doing anything.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. If we're not understanding normal, then we can't look at paranormal.
Exactly. And that's what the beauty of doing this stuff as comrades and co-researchers comparing information. This is what absolutely keeps us straight and honest on this stuff, because I have experiences and Frank has been there when some of them occurred, which really made him go, but but as we're getting into,
that's also a good benefit though. That's a real good benefit though, to have somebody look at what you're experiencing and try to put an understanding on it.
And sometimes over the years, he hasn't found one. But that's one of the reasons that we're doing the research we're doing, is to find a causality or a physicality that's going to be creating this.
Out here. If I ever get a bald spot, I'm going to blame it directly on Kat Hobson, because it's going to be from me scratching my head from some of the crap that she's made me experience in some of these investigations.
But it keeps you thinking. It does keep you thinking.
Right. So if that ever occurs, it's Kat's fault.
I am not wearing that blame. My husband has tried that for years. So I do have another question from Chad if y'all are up for it. Sure. And this is relevant to, I did not realize we were going to be all UFO all the time tonight, but this is cool for me. I love this topic, and I know all of y'all do too. So what are y'all's opinions on crop circles? Are they messages we're supposed to decipher, or do y'all believe most are fake? Let's not all speak at once. As I do let people know you're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama, and we're having a fantastic paranormal roundtable with Butch Witkowski, Frank Lee, Peter Haviland, and myself. So what do you say, guys?
Okay, that was smooth.
Some of the crop circles are very odd. They're strange. They give off different scientific information for researchers, but most of those are in England.
But not all.
Where they're giving off radiological readings or EMF, real high EMF readings, or where the crop itself has some type of anomaly to it. We've only ever had one in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of these are not. I'm not talking about the exotic ones now. I'm talking about just the circles where you'll just have a bunch of maybe 4, 5, 6 circles in a field. That's wind.
Okay.
Wind does that. But
I have seen the results of that.
The ones that are I consider to be the exotics, have a certain design or pattern, or they match up down the field to another one that's smaller or larger. But most of those are in England. There's the ones here in the United States. I mean, I haven't really. And there is a crop circle research team up in northern
the BLT group.
Yeah, and they haven't had anything lately. So
I will say that Nancy Talbot had a health crisis, so that might have something to do with that. But I know that the young man she was working with, I believe in Belgium, was pretty fascinating. In that he would know when they were going to show up, and he would take people there. I hope she is too, because she's brilliant, wonderful, and just a fantastic researcher. And I message her here and there just to say, I'm thinking about you. I miss you, because she is somebody who turned me on to this research and the microwave effects and such. Yeah, she has, and she's brilliant. I just love her work.
I got a really strange question about the crop circles. Well, I mean, I've never investigated them, and I've never seen anything outside of pictures. But the question I have is, do you think they're coming from above us, or do you think they're coming from below us?
That truly is a great question. What do you think, Butch?
I think above, because when they remove the, when they take samples of the crop, the grass or whatever it is, the roots and stuff are intact, like they've been there. The biggest thing that they find with these circles is that when the crop is taken down, it changes the strand structure of the stem. Yes. And when they say that, they mean that it's either crushed or folded, and
or like a microwave where it bursts.
Yeah, the crushed ones they think are ones that are man-made, and it's the ones that are bent, and they're all bent exactly at the same height. So like if somebody was doing it with a board, they'd have to lift their foot up. Well, for them to get the exact same pressure, that's not going to happen. But the ones that really looks interesting are the ones where the stem of the sample is identical in height from the ground level to where the bend occurs, and the bend looks just like it's a gentle, it's not a crushing bend. And if you just like if you take a straw and just bend a straw, if you bend it back and then pinch that, you can almost get your straw back.
Okay.
And those are the ones that they really go after.
Well, but some of them also, and I'm going to interject here because this is something that it took me a while to grasp. And in speaking with Nancy Talbot, who is probably one of the world's leading experts on this, she explained to me about it. Actually, some of them have had the actual molecular structure of the plants altered. And it's almost like a steaming effect. It's created. Yes, Tina's familiar with it. The nodules are burst open like from a microwave effect. And that to me was something that was very interesting. And that is not a very common effect. It's not in every one of them, obviously. But the number of them that have that, and it is universal through the design, are just very, it's a whole different ballgame with that. And that is, she's right, that is what causes that bend. But I mean, this is actually structurally changed.
I personally, I find the whole occurrence to be absolutely fascinating and mystifying, but it's one of those things that I personally haven't got to investigate much. So I personally know very little about it. So as far as I'm concerned, it could be ghost orbs. Do it that's going to be
great orbs again. Thanks, man.
Yes, and Tina also includes you get the weaving of the crops as well. But something else that I think is fascinating about this topic is the fact that we sent information about ourselves on a craft out into the world. And it has so much information about us. It has art renderings of our DNA, music, history, everything.
We also sent unsolicited nudes with that. I'm just saying it's kind of creepy.
Well, I'm certain.
I was just going to say unsolicited nudes into outer space. I mean, that's,
and people wonder why we get taken, right? But then you have the crop circle that was the computer disk, right? That was code. And that one was not, to my knowledge, assumed to be done by humans because it was so intricate and it was code. And that was before everyone knew code. So I just wondered if that wasn't a response. I mean, I know that's not a general theory for a response to what we sent out.
Why couldn't it be? Why couldn't it have been a responance?
I think it could have.
There's so many planets out there that we cannot be the only people out there.
Agreed.
I just just looking at. To me, I mean, me personally, I just don't think that we're the only people out there. I think it's my mind's mush, but at the same point, though, sending that information out to want to bring people in to communicate it with us, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. If we're dealing
I think it was a bad idea.
If we're dealing with good people and bad people out here, there's got to be good people, good aliens, bad aliens out there. So did we just send something out there to kick our own butt? I don't know.
Pulling attention when it wouldn't be a good thing. Yeah, it's a possibility, right?
So, and I mean, they might have blocked us for being perverts. We don't know, but
always a possibility.
That's a possibility.
If they could see our future, yeah.
But what you were saying, though, I absolutely agree. Statistically, if you consider the number of planets out there and the number of solar systems and just how expansive the universe is, for us to say, okay, well, we're the only place that is suitable for life and intelligent like that. To me, you would have to have that double syndrome.
But our concept of life Who's to say that these other folks aren't alive in a different way? We only know how we are alive, and what makes us alive.
Well, and we've made so many assumptions too about our own solar system.
Yes.
They have figured out that here recently, research on Pluto. Underneath that ice, there is what would be a somewhat habitable environment for us. It's fascinating how the ice actually works as a shield for the temperature, and you have flowing water. I mean, you have there's so many anomalies out there that are beyond anything we could have ever imagined, just at our back door in a planetary sense. I mean, just imagine.
Well, what about the concept of the moon, our moon, being hollow, and there actually being people inside of aliens inside of that? I mean, I know it sounds weird, but I mean, it's out there. It's a theory.
Well, the bong might have had something to do with that.
Yeah, exactly.
When you drop something and it rings, that's an interesting idea. But it's just fascinating.
It resonated for like an hour, a couple hours after they landed.
I don't know the time frame, but I do know that there was a resonation. And then you have an instance where when Betty Hill came back and she had the star map, and people didn't really know what that was, and she's like, it's a map. And then the woman researcher who without help of the internet created a model, on paper of that, she missed it by one thing, and then you get she goes back with better information later and redoes the entire thing from scratch, and voila, it matches Betty Hill's map.
Well, something that I'm just going to throw out there is, I'm sure that we're all
familiar. You're going to crush my dream, aren't you, Frank?
Oh, no. This actually kind of goes along with it. I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with Project Stargate, the government-funded research into ESP and remote viewing. One of the things about it is when remote viewing, we don't know if it's all done instantaneously, like across real time, if it's possible to see into, are they seeing into the past? Are they seeing into the future or whatever? But there is one instance, and I can't remember the details, but you can look this up on Google. And on archive.org, you can find some of these documents that are, actually available in their original form. But one of the cases, they believe that one of the remote viewers was actually seeing a settlement that might have been on Mars. And as outrageous as that sounds, especially coming from me as I'm saying it,
no doubt,
this is in a government record. So, it's fascinating. But it kind of brings to that question, though, when, even before NASA, before any of that, when anytime space was mentioned, why did we always talk about Mars?
I have often wondered that, because it just seems that you would be able to make something else work better. And I have heard the theory espoused that is where we originated. And that's why we're drawn to that. And I don't necessarily understand the pull to go back. If I were not so old, I would probably sign up to try that. And we have a question in chat that says, didn't Ingo Swann RV occupation on the moon? So I'm not familiar with Ingo Swann.
I have to throw this in here.
Mm-hmm.
What
Please.
if they are us?
Exactly. There's a man, Dr. Michael. Dadgummit, I'm going to Google him. But I heard a lecture by a gentleman who is a tenured professor, and he waited until he was tenured to write this book, that believes that this is us from our future coming back to that we have homogenized so much in the future because everything is cross-cultural now. There's so much access back and forth, and that as a result, humans became so homogenized that they're unable to sustain themselves, and that's why they're coming back and doing genetic testing and perhaps taking DNA to be able to alter the people in the future so that they can become sustainable again. I thought that was a fascinating concept.
Actually, it kind of makes sense to a point.
Ingo Swann, I was just thinking Ingo Swann might be, that name sounds so familiar. That may be the name that I couldn't think of that was affiliated with the Stargate project earlier, but I don't know.
The remote viewing from the government.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say that's Dr. Michael Masters, by the way. And his book is identified.
Ingo Swann, and there was another gentleman I can't remember that wrote a book about the government remote viewing. I can't remember him either.
Well, Lloyd Auerbach wrote with his
Lloyd wrote a book on it.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
And then Spy Wars, wasn't it? Spy Wars.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
ESP Wars. Yes.
ESP Wars.
Yeah.
And thank you. But Michael's book is Identified Flying Objects, Dr. Michael Masters, and that's who espoused that theory that we are us coming back.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also, I heard a fascinating theory one time, and this kind of goes back to, when we were talking about interdimensionality earlier. And, technology, if you ever look at Moore's Law says that our technology increases it increases like exponentially within a decade. We're looking at 100-fold increase, to summarize the math essentially. And if we consider the way that technology is going, right now, who's to say, according to this one theory I heard, that some of these visitors that we see, some of these things aren't necessarily so much interdimensional or interplanetary as they are our own descendants doing future archaeology research on us.
What do you think, Butch? I'm sorry.
Think if we had the ability to actually go back and witness some of these historical events, if, we could verify it from, witness it. I mean, I've heard.
But then you would change your timeline if you could take out Attila or
Bin
Laden or someone of that ilk.
I heard someone put that theory out there, and I can't say how much I subscribe to it. It's kind of out there, but it also, they said that was the cause for the Mandela effect.
Good point. Because I would change that. I would change things if I could.
They said that the Mandela effect was most likely caused as a inadvertent ripple of different.
Let me say, I would want to change that. I don't know that I would.
Mm-hmm. So it was an interesting theory. It's like I say, I'm not.
It is
100% convinced on it, but
Yeah, because I mean, if you were to change the past, you're changing the synchronicity of everything, because everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
So
and the way it's
what
supposed
is the old
to.
saying something about? What's the old saying something about if you kill a butterfly in the past, you can change mountains or something like that?
Oh yeah.
Butterfly effect.
Yeah.
Butch, what do you think? Because you were who brought up the... Yes. But you were who brought up that they could be us, and that kind of got taken away from you. What do you think? What's your opinion? Butch?
Yes, ma'am.
What's your opinion? You're who brought this subject up, and you kind of got stepped on going through there. I apologize for that, but what is your take on that?
There are so many theories, from the hollow moon to the they are us to bases on the moon and Mars. And the only ones that really resonate a lot with UFO researchers, and I'm only going to speak for the ones that I know, are the things that go with Mars. Pretty much anybody with a decent telescope can look all over the moon if they want to.
Yes.
But the canals and the glass tube-like structures running all over the planet in different areas are just weird. And we are not the only ones in this universe. And if anybody believes that, they're foolish.
Mm-hmm.
What about this galaxy?
I always have and will continue to think they are malevolent, not benevolent. And for a number of reasons, human mutilations, cattle mutilations, abductions. I mean, that's not being very benevolent. So, and I've told people that have said to me, well, if you get one is coming in or you're getting close to one, what are you doing? I always tell them the same thing: run like hell.
Don't be
stand
alone.
there like a goof.
Yes.
Take off. But there is no, now there's so much information out there now where the government has said, yes, we have been visited, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's just out there for any researcher to find. But even how to approach a downed UFO, what type of instruments to use, what kind of clothing you should be wearing, yada, yada, yada. What kind of fine and jail term you'll do if you even try it. But as far as our alien brethren, I probably wouldn't pick them up, trust them as far as I could throw their ship. There's just too much that is on the dark side of ufology that not very many researchers investigate. When I first started looking into that, I mean, I used to, many times used to sit back after looking at something and just go like, wow, that's nuts. But it is what it is. I mean, they're not down here curing cancer.
Well,
true that.
Well, just to kind of add to what Butch is saying, I mean, I think that he is absolutely spot on about the nature of anything that might be out there, because I'm just gonna point this out. Look at human civilization. Look through history, and I want you to find how many times that humans have ever conducted any large expedition, any type of exploratory mission, just to go sightseeing, or just to say, hey, I think there's some people out across the world, I'm going to go help them. It was never that. Anytime that in human history we have ever explored, it was for acquiring resources, acquiring land, and the way that humans throughout history have treated the people when we arrived there has not been very pretty. Now, when you consider, to an alien species, I mean, we're not going to be equal to them. It would be no different than, us arriving, hey, look at this monkey over here. Look at this animal, that's so, it's not like there's going to be any type of intellectual association there. We're going to be some strange animal that they find on this planet. So, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I would definitely be afraid too.
Ask the Native Americans how they were treated when someone came to visit them. Just as a recent example, and that is a recent example. Our history has a long history. Our history has a long experience of that. And so we have a question in chat, which is going from relevant to this, is wondering what your opinion is of why there are abductions. Then are they trying to destroy us or study us, or are we a novelty?
I would probably say that, I don't know how many people you have to dissect to know what's inside a human body. I've attended enough autopsies in my time. They all look alike. But there is research papers, as a matter of fact, it's being written right now, of pheromones, and that they seem to be missing in not only cattle but human mutilation. And now over in England, just in the last 2 years, I believe, 2 years, where there's been a small, although the cattle are mutilated, just like the sheep are mutilated just like our cattle, that the sheep behind the ear has a triangular opening, like it was like a punch out of a triangle, and the brain is missing. So
get out of town.
Not done here. We don't have that with cattle mutilations here, and the only place that we've been able to find that has been in Europe.
What would be the purpose of that?
But over in Europe, that's just not. They don't just have cattle; they have sheep, dogs. A lot of stuff is mutilated over there. Birds, cats. For the longest time, I guess. And it only stopped a little while ago. It was going on for about 1.5 years, 2 years, where they were finding cats that were cut in half.
What?
Perfectly in half. And in some cats, the upper portion of the innards were taken, lungs, heart, that kind of stuff. And in some, the lower section was taken. And that went on for over 2 years.
Was it in one area?
No, pretty much all over English countryside, pretty much.
Well,
because that could have been a serial killer in training. I mean, good heavens.
Well, think of how many years that we've been doing lab research on mice, chimpanzees, on, I mean, it's just a kind of a disturbing thought. I hope everyone has sweet dreams tonight, but guess what? Say we aren't chimpanzees for another species.
Cosmetics testing, we use all kinds of animals. Bunnies and rats and dogs and you name it. So, well, this is kind of a harsh place to leave our conversation.
Yeah, so sweet dreams. Merry Christmas, everyone.
We're a bunch of sick individuals.
I'm kind of depressed now.
Well, maybe we should work on that Grandma Got Run Over by an Alien song. So, but in all honesty, I have talked to so many people and different conferences that I go to, which are not nuts and bolts ufologists, as far as craft and the experiences that you, Butch, investigate. And, the experiencers all say, and this could be a subliminal implant of thought too, but the experiencers all say that the message that they're given and told to bring back is love. love is what you have to use to make things better in the world. So, unless that is something that's being used to create a alternative, as a cover, then there's a large number of experiencers that I've spoken to that have an affinity for their, almost like a Stockholm syndrome, but the message universally still seems to be, you need to love each other. You need to be bringing that out in your civilization. Maybe if we don't do that, that's going to have negative results, and that's what they're testing for. But it's just so odd. There's so many possibilities. There's so many unknowns. But I do know that the things that I hear, as you said, are disturbing, and it's not benevolent behaviors.
Well, and to what you're saying about that euphoric, that message of love, of, this is what we've got to do. I mean, you could also get the same effect, the same almost euphoric, same prophetic type effect from being administered LSD or a chemical or a similar it's late. A similar chemical to almost be used as a sedative.
It's being used by our government on us.
Right.
So,
the same as the dentist would.
Are you saying more of a conditioning kind of a thing to make us more docile for their agenda?
Good reason for them to take turns.
Okay, I have to say, you're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is Fate Mag Radio. I'm Kat Hobson, your host, with my guests, Butch Witkowski, Peter James Haviland, and Frank Lee. And you're into overtime. Okay. Please.
So yeah, I mean, if you can administer pheromones that are going to trigger that subconscious response that we know happens with pheromones, and then you induce a mind-altering substance that creates a euphoric experience to cover the real experience, you create that conditioning environment that this person's they're going to be more docile. They're not going to resist as much. They're not going to fight it. It's not going to be traumatic to such an extent. They're not, it's going to make it easier for the next time.
Screen memories.
Mm-hmm. So, and, when you administer the right chemicals and induce just a few key elements, our brains like to, with just a few basic blocks, our brains like to put the pieces together themselves. So, that's all it takes sometimes.
Yep. Hey, Butch, I got a really weird question for you, and I'm sure you probably heard it 1,000 times. You there?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bigfoot being an alien?
Kind of a stretch.
Yeah.
But
okay.
It's,
I don't know. I saw Star Wars.
The only problem with
True that.
The only problem with Bigfoot is we've been at this now for 52, 53 years, and we don't have one shred of evidence. Not one.
We got a lot of blurry pictures.
And I would argue that there is evidence as far as scat and fur, although it's not fur, it's hair, but it comes back unknown sometimes, right? So it would be an anomaly.
Yeah, but there's really only one place in the whole world that you can send that stuff to, and that's down to Australia, or New Zealand. They have a DNA database that covers every animal, unknown, known, from before, from now, from stuff that's just being caught up on. And the problem with DNA evidence, which is what you're going to need, or a good thermal imaging picture, is for DNA, you need a control subject. So when people say they got DNA from Bigfoot, I want to know where they got the control subject.
Yeah.
Well, then they go like, so
yeah.
For DNA you need a control subject. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Well, but we've got new species being found all the time.
Yeah,
and
but
so there's not a test.
Yeah, but
there's not a test subject for those.
Been deer scat, bear scat, mountain lion scat. I mean, they've come up with every kind of scat known to mankind, and then some.
Right.
But when they say unknown, it could be a bear had eaten, chewed on a coyote, and the coyote ate a rabbit the day before it was eaten. So when they trace it all out like that, then it's kind of worthless.
Okay. So what do you think people are seeing?
Oh, I think they're seeing something. I mean, there's something out there. But you got to remember that, especially people that aren't woods person, people that don't go into the woods, haven't hunted, they come out of the city, they go for a walk in the state park or something like that, they see something big and brown run through the woods. Well, there's a lot of big and brown things that run through the woods.
Bipedal?
Yeah. Well, and there's one video that I watched the other day. It was a thermal imaging shot taken from a great distance. I mean, it was a good distance. And thermal imaging, when you're looking at something that's a couple hundred yards off, it could be anything. And then the guy was saying it's bipedal and it's walking, but then it dropped down on all fours. It was definitely a bear. But what you want to get is a thermal image of something up close, and that's what we're looking for the bipedal canines.
Well, that's why I think thermal imaging will eradicate a lot of questions because it will eradicate the ability to hide so well.
Right.
But
exactly.
And
you can't fool with it.
Are you reading in the WBHM-DB chat?
Who's that to?
Which statement?
There's a slew of them coming down relevant to the where it says, yes, we do prints and DNA. She was talking about evidence. So, but I was just curious because she's been very well informed on the other topics that we've covered. And she seems very adamant that there are tests that are detailed and defined, and they can tell what the creature is eating. She said, a retired coroner. So, I found that interesting too. But I love when we get smart people in chat. We always have it, but they don't always talk. So, I like it when people interact. But I just find it interesting because a lot of people, Frank and I were presenting at an event recently, and there was a gentleman there who was presenting on Bigfoot. And it was a good presentation. And he had said that he had not wanted to come out about it. It took him a couple of years to come out about it because he was afraid that his family and other people would think he was crazy, mock him. He would be ostracized in his social group and stuff like that.
Well, that's a legitimate concern. That's a legitimate concern, too, because people can get really, really strange.
Yes. Well, when I asked him later about dogmen, his response was, I won't use the terminology, but it was basically a bunch of hooey. And
well, there was. I know that there was a Michigan dogman that somebody had come up with on a video that he eventually said that it was him in a ghillie suit that took the shot and made it a performance piece.
Butch is experienced a dogman.
Yeah.
And
first let me just answer the question here to the lady regarding the DNA studies.
Okay.
Melba Ketchum, veterinary doctor, spent a fortune, and I mean a fortune, $200,000, along with 3 or 4 other researchers. And they took all their evidence down to that place in New Zealand to test all the DNA. And there was such a mixture. It was squirrel hair, feathers, skunk scat, squirrel. I mean, there was just so much stuff in there. And I mean, she adamantly just said, that this is it. I mean, this is the DNA. But you can't produce a control subject. What's the DNA from? You have nothing. I mean, if somebody would go dig up my father and take his DNA and match it to mine, it would match. But if my father wasn't here, I mean, they couldn't get the DNA from him. My DNA is my DNA. That's the part that gets a little squirrely because I look.
But it would
people are seeing something.
But it would still show
People
human or a group as opposed to an individual. You're right. It would show a group as opposed to an individual.
Right. But
I mean, it's kind of like what you see.
I mean, they haven't found a body. No bones, no body. Every shot taken's blurry. It's really nothing you can argue about because there's nothing to argue about. I mean, people tell you what they see. The thing that does interest me, though, is that where they have the flash of light where a Bigfoot is seen and a flash of light that is disappeared. And those reports go back a long way. And there's a lot of investigators looking at that right now.
That is what I am hearing a lot about, too.
Yeah.
And that's leading toward the dimensionality.
Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on Patterson Gimlin? I mean, there's a lot of thoughts on both sides.
Well, yeah. You have one group that says the film is no good. You say another group that the film is fine.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, the last people that went over the whole film was Kodak Company, and they said the film was not distorted. And then I guess there were a bunch of anthropologists that had a roundtable not too long ago. I think it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, where they matched up to the way it walked, the muscle structure, size, as what and all their stuff came out right on the money. But even in that group, there were some detractors.
So we're kind of back on square one as far as what we're looking at then, kind of.
Right, yeah. There's something there, but whatever it is, nobody knows. I mean, there's a lot of descriptions. There's a lot of blurry photographs. I mean, there's a lot of information, but none of the information jives. So, and some of the researchers, some of the researchers that are out there.
Right. I'm listening.
No, I was just going to say some of the researchers out there. This past summer, I was up in the Bigfoot area under research by Dr. Meldrum, and spent some time with him. And he feels the same way. This guy's been doing this for 30 years.
Right.
He says, "Yeah, we got a lot of footprints. We got a lot of this. We got a lot of that. We got all this, but we can't say what it is." If it's a possible interdimensional being, taking a picture of it, would it be blurry?
I think it would have to be in transition for that to happen.
That's possible.
Not everyone.
But, you got to remember that a lot of these pictures are taken with cell phones.
Right.
Well, I see a lot of video, seriously, and I find that fascinating. and there are two people here in Alabama who are getting this. I don't know. I am very open to the idea because I experience things that people don't believe in too. And so it's something that I'm still out on.
You know, something that too we have to really consider is there is the overwhelmingly absurd amount of strange occurrences that people report. The strange footage that's captured there. I mean, there's all of this. And I mean, it goes back as far as humans have, as long as humans have been writing things down, they've been writing about strange experiences. And I mean, really, to such a degree that there's really no debate of, you know, is this happening? Are people experiencing this? The only debate is, okay, what truly is it? But here's what we have to look at. No matter how substantial the evidence that we submit today, like you were mentioning, you know, sending the information to a lab. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine if you are a tenured scientist at a credible university, and this is not only cryptozoological, I mean, this is ufology, this is paranormal, this is, you know, anything anomalous.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine the risk that a researcher would have if they put their stamp of approval and said, you know, this is Bigfoot on a sample that was submitted to their lab? They would risk losing their tenure. They would risk losing their credibility. They would move from being the head of the laboratory to they would risk being sent to the basement to have their desk amongst the file cabinets if they were still allowed on university property. And
well, that's the way Doc Meldrum's the same way. I mean, you know, he's at the university, and you know, he says, you know, and when he first started, you know, anthropology-wise, looking at simian ape prints as compared to Bigfoot prints. And, you know, he's got like 300 or 400 casts in his office there. And he said, you know, out of the 300-400 casts that are sitting in here, he said, there's three. He said that I have no explanation for. He said the other ones, he said, you know, I can take a certain percentage out for fake. I can take a certain percentage out for attempted fakes, you know, something. But he said there's three. And he had them at this thing that I went to this summer. And he said, look at the dermal ridges. Now, I have about 20 in my library casts, and I don't have any with dermal ridges. Those three have dermal ridges.
You know, there's a gentleman out here in Texas, Jimmy Chilcutt. He's a retired criminal scientist, police officer. And he's been studying that for a long, long time. He's even traced down different footprints that have the same dermal ridges to show that they move.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that's the little things like dermal ridges or like cripplefoot. You know, those cases are amazing, and there aren't many people out there like, you know, the guy you're just talking about, or Dr. Jeff Meldrum and a couple other anthropologists, and they've gotten prints in the Himalayas that they can't, you know, the Yeti, different size, different thickness, different length, different width, but it is. It's amazing. It is just amazing.
You know, and it's kind of sad because a lot of your research teams come across some fascinating evidence, but and they do. You know, you see this too in parapsychology. You see from the neuroscience community, you see fascinating evidence put out there in some of these studies and things, but you have to know what to look for. You will never see the word paranormal mentioned in it because they make sure to distance themselves from certain key words, because there's so much in paranormal pop culture that has kind of turned into a three-ring circus that it terrifies a lot of your credible, serious researchers, that they have to be very careful how they word things to not get associated with, the TV characters and all of that stuff.
Or the computer researchers.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. If they ever did, they would risk, losing, their
respectability.
Yeah, so you really have to know how to decipher what they're actually saying. But it's kind of funny. It's a paradox. You have to do a lot of research to understand the research to decode the research.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, I want to say something about the tenure and the academia, and why things don't get reported that are, and why things do get reported that aren't. And I'm going to go to the Atacama mummies in the Chilean desert, because when I first became aware of them and that this was actually something that was being tested, these are 6 foot, and it's a 6-inch, not 6 foot. Before, it was said to be a human fetus found in 2003. The DNA analysis done in 2018, initially the guy said, this is not human. If you will look at the structure. And I was told that there are more than just this one. So if this is actually something that is mutations, which, when the report actually came out, the printed report actually came out, it was decided that this is actually a premature human fetus with, unusual mutations associated with dwarfism and scoliosis. And, then those findings were later refuted. And it's pretty interesting that the people that live in this desert say they're here all the time. They're night creatures. And, it just, to me, because I was aware of it before the report came out, then I saw what they were saying about it. And then, boom, all of a sudden it's human with all of these mutations. And if you look at it, it looks like descriptions of aliens that people have encountered and over centuries, well, decades, not centuries. But, it's interesting because there you had a forensic specialist who was saying one thing, and when his written report came out, he was saying something else. And I do think that happens quite often in these circumstances, because nobody wants to be that guy that, had a great position and then all of a sudden, you're homeless on the street trying to find something to use to shake to get change. So,
right.
Well,
I mean, you don't want to have the Tesla syndrome going. I mean,
well, you don't want to disappear and have your work go away like he did either, or suffer his same demise.
One of the most brilliant minds of our in the last 1,000 years or so, but he was so far ahead of his time. People thought, no, he's crazy, and he suffered just. It's so tragic the way that his story ended, and you're going to see that. And two, you have politics gets involved, and that's something that scares me in science today, is how much politics is getting involved in science. But you have different theories, different discoveries that get, silenced or pushed under the rug because of a political agenda that it might interfere with. You have different things like, our food gut, or the food pyramid.
Yes.
That we've heard most of our lives, or, all of our lives, is completely a load of crap. That was bad science based on bad research.
And it's actually
completely
inverted.
Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But but for political reasons, it got pushed and adopted, and it stuck due to, like I say, it was some political reasons and some, favoritism going on. And anybody who dares challenge that now, because it has been established so long, is seen as a quack, because people just accept it as,
exactly.
It's the gospel truth. You don't question it. You don't go against that. And unfortunately, you see that too often.
When I worked for the American Cancer Society, the things that are common practice and treatment today were being used in Mexico and other places. People were going there for treatment. And so the articles that were coming out were calling these things quackery. That was the term used by the scientific powers that be, as well as the organizations, to keep people following protocols here. And so, it just astounds me that we take forever to approve treatment programs for people that have things that are being treated everywhere else successfully. And yet we're the country that people come to, ostensibly for their health care. It just blows my mind.
It's a logical paradox. Yeah, it's, that, and, those are just a few examples of why I believe it is so critical that, we not follow anything blindly. We have to question everything. We have to dig. We have to research.
Sometimes you get in trouble for that. You guys know more about that than I do.
Yeah, but it's like I said, I would have been one of the first ones that, got the Inquisition, but, it would have been worth it.
Yeah. Well, Tina says you have to be your own doctor, and I happen to use a holistic physician who is a medical doctor as well, because I believe in the best of both worlds. And she's also an herbalist.
Right. Well, my doctor has told me that he's going to bill me twice for having to put up with me. So,
I can see that.
Because of the arguments that we've had over the years. But,
I can totally see that. And, gentlemen, I did not mean to take that conversation over. This is supposed to be all about y'all. Butch and Peter, I apologize. Frank's used to me.
I'm all good here.
I'm good.
Well, I have so enjoyed this, and we have been a half hour over. I love that we can do this overtime together, because y'all are some of the most interesting men, or any gender, in these fields that I know. And Peter, I have been wanting to pick your mind about your regression therapies and stuff, and and the other things that you do with your hypnosis, because you help people with all walks of their life. I think that's wonderful.
Well, I try. Thank you.
Well, you do.
It keeps me out of trouble.
Well, mostly.
Well, yeah, mostly, I guess.
Yeah. And Butch,
it lets me to still sleep indoors, so I'm still good.
Well, that's a good thing. I like that.
Yeah.
And, I am just so pleased and appreciative of y'all being here. Butch, thank you. I know that people want you answering their questions all the time. You're brilliant in your work, and I appreciate you always answering my questions and being my friend. Anytime. Both of you guys. And Frank.
And I'm just going to say, Butch, it is great to hear from you. I know you're, going through a scare there for a while, and you just don't know how good it is to get to chat with you again. It's been too long.
You talking about the drinking problem or the heart attack?
I was talking about.
Well, the heart attack led to the drinking problem, right?
Well, I wasn't going to mention anything about the jail time, but I was glad you made parole.
Oh God!
I love you guys.
I'm glad to see you doing better.
Yep, doing better. Gets better every day.
Good.
Wow.
And I'm still in the holding cell. Nobody's gave me bail yet.
Oh no!
What's up with that?
That's tragic.
I'm trying to borrow a few dollars. As soon as I can get some bail money, I'm on my way. So
road trip.
Again, like we said earlier in the program, just put my initials on the checks. It's CASH. We'll get you out of there.
In all seriousness, y'all are the best in y'all's fields, and I'm so glad that we're friends and that we can have these conversations, and it was fun to have it all together. This was pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd actually like to do it again. There's quite a few things that we didn't even get a chance to talk about.
We didn't even touch on very much outside of ufology. We hit the Bigfoot pretty good, but I love all of this. We'll just have to reschedule another one. Or not reschedule, but schedule another one.
But when we do it again, you're going to have to schedule it for longer than 15 minutes, because this just wasn't enough time.
I know, right? Well, we will do that. And, I do.
10 minutes ago.
I thank you. This has been fun, and I know our listeners enjoyed it because they're sitting there just like, this is awesome. I'm learning so much. And, they're the reasons that we do this. And I do want to let people know that we are going to be off next week. Obviously, we're going into the Christmas week and then New Year's. But I do, on the 29th, have Dave Spinks joining me. Speaking of Bigfoot, and I am looking forward to that conversation. I have never interviewed him, so that's going to be fun. And from Fate Magazine Radio, I just want to let y'all know that I hope that you have a fantastic holiday season. I know that we're into Hanukkah, and I know that we are going to be having Kwanzaa right after Christmas. And I just think it's fantastic that everyone here has the opportunity to celebrate as they see fit. I think that's a beautiful thing. So do stay tuned, though, because on Monday night, tomorrow night, you have the Paranormal Pride. Then we will be going to... That may not be true. I believe we are going... Everybody is off next week. So... That's a good thing. If you will please keep Kevin Malik in your prayers. He is out. The Paraversal Universe is not going to be airing until into January. This is their downtime, but Kevin also is having some health issues, and he'll be ready when it's time to come back. So if you could just keep him and Jennifer in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you so much. I appreciate every single one of you. And you know what? Go out there. Be the change you want to see in the world. Heaven knows that a little bit of love is a great thing, and it'd be nice to share that right now. And it's a good thing. Be the friend you want to see. Gentlemen, I thank you so much, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. So
happy holidays to y'all.
Have a good holiday.
You too. Frank, I will be talking to you soon too.
Absolutely. Well, it was an honor and a pleasure as always. Had a great time. And had a great time chatting with both you gentlemen as well. Look forward to doing it again.
Can't wait, guys. We'll get together and get a date. Y'all have a good evening.
You too.